And welcome back to Mobile Mornings on FM Talk 106.5. And pleasure to be joined in studio again by a good friend of mine, Brian Comer with local personal injury law firm Tobias and Comer Law. Brian, good morning.
Good morning, Dalton. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And looking forward to discussing this next thing. It's something we've talked about, defective products, in the past. Mm-hmm. And, when I think defective products, I'm thinking sometimes you get frozen bags of food that end up with rubber in them or rocks, and they have to call those back. Or right. I think most recently the biggest story was about airbags and how many people were affected by something like that. But really, defective products span a number of things. Pretty much anything that can come in the house could be defective.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just like you said, talking about the airbag recall. I mean, when something is produced in Alabama, there's a law called Alabama's Extended Manufacturer Liability Doctrine. That's a mouthful, but what it says is that a manufacturer has a responsibility if it's going to put a product on the market in Alabama that it has to be it has to be safe for its intended use. And so in Alabama, if a product isn't safe, then it has to be recalled, or they have to warn of the danger that the product causes.
And is there, I'm sure there is, but like a threshold when somebody complains? First off, who do they complain to if something happens to them or they know of something that could be dangerous? Who do they let know? And is there a threshold for about how many complaints before they start taking it really seriously?
Yeah, so there's several ways that the complaints can go. You can always make the complaint directly to the manufacturer. So we've talked about car seats before, for instance. If something is messed up on the car seat, contact the manufacturer of the car seat. You can also go to something called the Consumer Product Safety Commission. It's an arm of the federal government, and it is who actually sets recalls and issues recalls, unless a company does so voluntarily. But ultimately, the manufacturer has to report to the CPSC with this data, and it varies on products, but it's a really, really low threshold. Like, when you're talking about something like a vehicle, I believe I read it was somewhere like 0.1% of the vehicles have to be defective in order to issue the recall. So it's a small, and that's not to say that the same would hold true across product lines. Car seats, for instance, could be a different number. Mm-hmm. It really depends on what the danger is and what the effect is on the end user. So something that's deadly that they identify, they're going to want to pull off the market as soon as possible or issue a fix.
That makes sense. Law 251 with Brian Comer from Tobias and Comer Law, and we were talking, CPSC, that's right, CPSC.
Mm-hmm, right.
They take it seriously. They're not like, some government agencies, you're lucky to get an appointment first off, and then after that, good luck getting whatever it is you need done. But when you're dealing with the safety of products, it doesn't sound like they're messing around.
No, they don't. And like what we were just saying, I mean, if you have a product that can kill or seriously injure someone, they take that extremely seriously. And everybody says, you get the warnings about, don't eat the pack of whatever in the shoes that you buy. Okay, but these are really heavy kind of topics that they cover. I mean, if you're talking about like with the exploding airbags, for instance, I mean, people were getting killed and seriously injured. And so the whole point is to make sure that manufacturers are held responsible for putting these products on the market. And
some of these common defective products, while dangerous, yes, but there's something about explosions that gets people's attention.
Right.
And so many people have been burned by defective products. Mm-hmm. And you think this new age we're headed into or already are in, so many battery-powered devices. And we've already seen over the last 2 decades. Remember the hoverboards that were so popular for so long? They went through some problems. A lot of electric cars in the early stages were going through problems where people can get seriously injured and burned.
Absolutely, and laptops, cell phones, those lithium batteries are really can be unstable, and that's where there's been a lot of problems with fire. But you're right. I mean, fire. We've had a lot of cases where someone has been burned, whether it be from fire or whether it's from scalding water or from some other source. And I had a physician actually in a deposition describe it as the worst injury that can possibly happen to somebody. I mean, obviously a death, a fatality is the ultimate injury, but a burn is something, it's scary, it's just so traumatic for the person who experiences it and their loved ones, and they're awful.
Yeah, it changes the way they look very often, and absolutely terrible. And hot water heaters, you think of so many of these things, we think we have a good grasp on how they work and whether they'd be dangerous or not. Hot water heaters and other devices around the house, people kind of, unless they work with them on a regular basis, they're kind of at the mercy of whoever, first off, built that device, and secondly, installed it. But you see all kinds of product recalls for those too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you're dealing with stuff, things that are gas powered, and we've handled cases before where, water heaters due to some defect, explode. I mean, and that's from the gas supplying the device. You absolutely have to be super careful with it, and we're at the mercy of the manufacturer and the people who installed it, which is where the CPSC comes in and where Alabama's defective product law, AEMLD, comes in.
And probably in that same mode there, as far as having someone to come over and do work for you. That's why it's important to make sure they have all the prerequisites right and all the licensing, and make sure that they have insurance also.
Absolutely, yeah. Make sure they're bonded. A lot of times, and everybody wants to be thrifty and cost conscious and all that sort of thing. And but anytime you're having a product installed, a stove, a water heater, particularly if there's gas involved or electricity, if you're putting something like that in a home, I know people like my dad who can install anything, and they're, just really, really smart and can do it. But if you have that trepidation, if you are like, I don't know if I can do this, hire somebody who's reputable to install the thing.
And let's talk about something we seem to talk about fairly often. We were doing it with the car seats and everything, but when something does happen to you with a product, what are the steps here? And you want to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else, especially someone that might be using the same product. You would tell them, if you knew your neighbor was using the same device that just exploded in your hand, you would let them know. It's important to let everyone know when there's a product that isn't working properly.
Absolutely. Notify the manufacturer. I mean, so, I know I'm guilty of this. When you buy a product, you want to go toss the paperwork or whatever, read the manual, and included in the manual is typically, and it's a lot easier now. You don't have to fill something out. But when you register the product, it usually has a way to contact the manufacturer if there's a defect, or you can go directly to the CPSC's website itself and report a defective product.
And again, it's important to be on the recall list.
Absolutely.
When you buy these things, I guess most give you a way to go ahead and register your product.
Right.
And it's important to follow that. Also, how about for people who have used a defective product and ended up injured, or their lives otherwise changed for the worse? You guys have worked, I'm sure, countless cases involving defective products.
Right, we have, and it's across product lines, and this is one of those things that's kind of tough to talk about because you can't say, okay, well, this airbag, for instance, because it can be a water heater, it could be a ATV, it could be a car seat, it could be a car, but the biggest thing is, after you're stabilized or your loved one is, to make sure you preserve it, make sure that you hang on to the product and keep it in a place where nothing else can happen to it, so that people can look at it and see what it was that happened as part of the investigation. That's what we do. And
I'm sure those who get injured on the job, if it's a defective product, there you guys will work with those cases too.
Absolutely, and that's a very good point that you bring up, because a lot of times, particularly here on the water, with our access to the river and the bay and the Gulf, there are workplace accidents that can be really awful, really, really terrible, bad things can happen. And a lot of times it is due to a defective product, a defective condition. And so, it's important to contact somebody as soon as possible to make sure that evidence is preserved, to make sure that everything is properly looked at, to make sure that, can understand exactly what it was that happened, and then hold those accountable for who were at fault.
I love it. And you've got the information on how to contact you, also information about Tobias and Comer Law there on the website, tobiascomerlaw.com. And I love the resources. We talk about this often, but you have plenty of cases you've worked in the past, many of defective product cases, and also a good checklist on what you can do to prevent something like that from happening to you or what to do afterwards. Brian, really appreciate you coming in with us again this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dalton. Appreciate it.
That's another edition of Law 251 with Brian Comer from Tobias and Comer Law. Again, I encourage you to check out their website. Plenty of great stuff there at tobiascomerlaw.com. That does it for Mobile Mornings on this Monday. Coming up next, the Jeff Porsche right here on FM Talk 106.5.